The speculation is no longer confined to online forums or discussion boards. It has officially reached the top levels of the United States government. For years we have cautioned you that the moment would arrive when the authorities, the people who control the currency and direct the armed forces, would understand that they cannot manufacture silver. We informed you that when the physical scarcity truly emerged, the government would not simply observe and allow the exchanges to fail. They would step in, they would act to obtain supply. They would work to acquire the physical resources needed for national survival. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that moment has arrived, and even Asian Guy is here, known as John A.G. from Currency Archive. While everyday buyers were focused on the holiday shopping season, and while the traditional financial media was discussing Bitcoin and technology stocks, the United States Department of Defense quietly completed one of the most important strategic actions in the history of the metals market. We are now getting confirmation of a huge game-changing agreement that was signed in private around December 15th, 2025. The contract is finalized, the money is assigned, the signal is obvious. The United States is afraid of running out of silver. Here's the truth that the paper traders are overlooking. The United States government, through the Department of Defense and the Department of Commerce, has joined forces with Korea Zinc to construct a huge $7.4 billion critical minerals processing plant in Clarksville, Tennessee. This is not a minor grant. This is not a study paper. This is the first significant non-ferrous metal processing plant to be constructed on American territory since the 1972nd. Consider that carefully. For 50 years, the United States was willing to allow China and other countries to process its metals. We sent away our industrial work and brought back the completed product. But now, in the middle of a silver squeeze, suddenly Uncle Sam is investing $7 billion to bring the processing back home. Why at this moment? Because they understand what we understand. They recognize the global supply chain is breaking, but the financial amount isn't even the most alarming part of this agreement. You have to examine the structure of the ownership to grasp the level of concern in Washington. This isn't just a private business getting a loan. The Pentagon, the United States military, is acquiring a 40% equity position in this project. Now, let me say that again so it registers fully. The Department of Defense will control nearly half of the production capacity of this plant. They are not just a buyer, they are the controller. This means that the silver, the zinc, and the indium that emerge from this facility are not going to the open market to reduce the price on the exchanges. They are not going to be sold to JP Morgan to help them cover their positions. They are going directly into the strategic reserves of the U.S. military. They are being taken from the commercial market before they are even processed. This project, which is being financed partly by JP Morgan, and we will discuss their involvement in a moment, is designed to handle 1.1 million tons of raw material each year. It will manufacture 13 specific non-ferrous metals, and guess what? 11 of those 13 metals are classified as critical minerals by the U.S. Geological Survey. Silver is at the top of that list. The government is essentially taking control of a portion of the supply chain because they understand that without silver, they cannot manufacture the Tomahawk missiles, the F-35 fighter jets, or the next generation satellites that they need to rival China. They examined their reserves in December. They looked at the export restriction coming from China in January, and they became alarmed. They realized they were exposed. And this essentially confirms every single thing the silver squeeze community has been stating for 5 years. We said silver was a strategic metal. They called it a worthless rock. We said the industrial requirement would exceed the supply. They said we were irrational. We said the government would eventually have to intervene to obtain metal. They said the free market would manage it. Well, does a $7.4 billion government-supported processing plant look like the free market to you? No. It looks like a desperate attempt to obtain resources during an emergency. It looks like resource control, and it demonstrates that at the highest levels of authority, they view silver not as a currency to be controlled, but as a material that must be obtained at any price. So, when you examine the price movement today on January 5th, 2026, do not view it separately. Link the events. On December 15th, the Pentagon finalizes the agreement to obtain metal. On January 1st, China prohibits exports. On January 5th, the price in Shanghai jumps to $82. Do you believe these events are random? Of course not. The intelligent money, and in this situation, the government money acted first. They obtained their supply in December because they anticipated the price was going to rise in January. They purchased their protection before the crisis began, and now you're witnessing the consequences. And this brings us to the most unexpected development in this entire situation. The organization that is enabling this massive shift from paper to physical is none other than our old adversary, the very designer of the paper suppression system itself. We need to discuss the bank that is organizing the financing for this facility. We need to discuss JP Morgan because if you believe they are financing this agreement just to earn a few dollars on interest, you are overlooking the bigger picture. They are not increasing their short position. They are protecting against their own failure. They are preparing for the collapse of the paper market that they built. Let's examine why the biggest short in history is suddenly financing the biggest physical infrastructure project in 50 years. You have to realize that JP Morgan is not a risk taker. They are the casino, and the casino never wagers on a losing proposition if they can avoid it. For the last 15 years, we have correctly called them the opponent. We have recorded their manipulation, their huge short positions, and their control of the futures market. But do not make the error of thinking they are foolish. They are the most advanced commodity trading organization on the planet. And if the biggest shorter of silver is suddenly investing billions of dollars into financing a physical facility in Tennessee, it is because they understand the situation has transformed. They are acknowledging with their investments that the era of paper is finished. They observe the same information we do. They see the shortages. They see the Chinese solar requirement. They see the breakdown of the London pricing. And they have understood that in a world of physical scarcities, holding a paper short contract is a death sentence. If the price reaches $200 an ounce, their paper shorts will destroy them. But if they finance the facility, if they manage the plant that manufactures the metal, then they are no longer the short seller. They become the controller. They are shifting from betting against the price of silver to controlling the flow of silver. This agreement with Korea Zinc is their emergency exit. While they are publishing research reports telling you to leave the market, while they are telling the everyday public that silver is overpriced at $75, they are quietly writing payments to construct the infrastructure that will manage the supply for the next 30 years. They are essentially bringing their own business model back home. Instead of depending on the London storage, which are depleted, or the Chinese refineries, which are now unavailable to the West, they are constructing a stronghold in Tennessee where they can process the metal themselves. And you have to examine where this metal is originating. This facility is specifically designed to process materials from Latin America. It is built to take the raw ore from Mexico, from Peru, and yes, potentially from a post-conflict Venezuela, and transform it into strategic bars for the U.S. military. JP Morgan understands that Latin America manufactures the silver, but historically that silver was transported to China for processing. By financing this plant, JP Morgan is helping the U.S. government remove China from the process. They are establishing a closed supply chain. Latin American mines to Tennessee facility to Pentagon missiles, and JP Morgan sits in the center financing the transaction, likely taking a portion of every ounce and ensuring that they have primary access to the physical bars when the squeeze goes vertical. This is the ultimate insider action. They are telling the world to sell, but they are purchasing the factory. They are shifting from paper games to physical infrastructure because they understand the squeeze is authentic. They know that when the Shanghai price separates from the exchange price, which we are observing right now with that massive difference, the paper market becomes meaningless. The only thing that matters is who has the physical metal. And by the time this facility starts operating, JP Morgan intends to be the ruler of physical. So do not be upset at them. Study from them. Mirror their transaction. They're getting as close to the physical metal as possible. They're avoiding the futures contracts and going directly to the origin. You should do the same. Every ounce you purchase today is an ounce that JP Morgan wishes they could manage. You are essentially getting ahead of the bank that is getting ahead of the world. And this action by the banks and the Pentagon creates a harsh reality for the global market. While Washington and Wall Street are frantically constructing safety measures in Tennessee, the water level in the rest of the world is increasing rapidly. The separation they are preparing for isn't in the future. It is occurring right now on the other side of the Pacific. While the Americans construct plans for 2029, the Chinese have already made their action in 2026. We need to examine the results today. We need to look at the price that is shouting at us from Shanghai. Because while JP Morgan prepares for the extended conflict, the battle for the immediate price is being waged in the Asian market. And the figures coming out of China this morning are absolutely devastating for the paper shorts. While the exchange in New York is trying to persuade you that silver is worth $75 an ounce, while they use their paper systems to paint a picture of stability, the Shanghai Futures Exchange is declaring the truth. We are looking at the live information from the Asian close. The price of silver in Shanghai has just reached 18,420 per kilogram. Now, unless you trade on the Chinese exchange, that number might just sound like a lot of yuan. So, Let's calculate together. Let's convert that into the language of the US dollar so you can see exactly how damaged the market has become. If you take 18,420 yuan and you divide it by the current exchange rate, which is roughly 7.1 yuan to the dollar, and then you convert kilograms to troy ounces, you don't get 75 dollar. You get a price that is sitting between $81 and $82 per ounce. Do you comprehend the seriousness of what I'm stating? Right now, at this exact moment, there are two prices for the exact same asset on the same planet. In New York, silver is $75. In Shanghai, silver is $82. That is a gap of nearly $7 an ounce. In the world of high-speed finance, where traders compete for a difference of 1 penny, a difference of $7 is not just an irregularity. It is a damaged market. It is a collapse of the global pricing system. It is a blaring alarm telling you that the West has lost authority of the price. For 50 years, New York and London established the price to the world. If New York said silver was inexpensive, it was inexpensive everywhere. But today, Shanghai has looked at New York and said, "We don't care what your paper price indicates. We need the metal, and we are ready to pay $7 more than you to obtain it." This difference is the arbitrage opening, and it is the single most dangerous force acting on the market right now. Consider the mechanics of it. If you are a global metal trader, if you are Glencore or Trafigura or just a huge refinery with inventory in London, what do you do when you observe this price gap? Do you sell your silver in New York for $75? Of course not. That would be financial incompetence. You put that silver on a plane, you put it on a boat, and you transport it to Shanghai immediately. You sell it for $82 and you collect the risk-free $7 profit. This creates a giant pulling sound. It is the sound of physical inventory being removed out of the Western storage, out of the exchange-registered supplies, out of the London Bullion Market Association warehouses, and moving east. It is a one-way flow of wealth. The West is selling its strategic resources at a reduction, and the East is purchasing them at a premium because they know the true value. And this clarifies the alarm in Washington. This clarifies the $7.4 billion facility. The Pentagon isn't foolish. They have economists. They have analysts watching these same displays. They understand that if this difference continues, there will be no silver remaining in the United States by the time they need it for their missiles in 2027. It will all be in China. Every single ounce of available silver is moving towards the highest bidder, and right now, the highest bidder is the Chinese industrial system. The United States government understood they cannot compete in a bidding competition on the open market without admitting that the dollar has lost its purchasing strength. So instead of bidding up the price on the exchange, which would shatter the illusion of a strong dollar, they decided to construct a fortress. They decided to build the Clarksville facility to capture the metal before it can leave the hemisphere. But let's go deeper into why Shanghai is paying $82. Why is the price so much higher there? Is it gambling? Is it a bubble? No, it is desperation. As we discussed on January 1st, the new export restrictions went into effect. But it goes beyond that. The Chinese economy is experiencing a huge internal transformation. They are actively removing the dollar from their supply chain by paying a higher price in yuan. They are encouraging domestic miners to keep their metal at home. They're telling the miners in Inner Mongolia and Yunnan, "Don't export. We will pay you better than the Americans." And at the same time, they are emptying the international market. This $82 price is the actual price. The $75 price on the exchange is the paper price. The paper price is established by banks trading futures contracts that are completed in cash. They can create as many contracts as they want. The actual price is established by factories that need physical bars to function. They cannot create bars. And when paper meets physical, physical wins. The $7 gap is simply the extra cost you have to pay to escape the paper system and hold the real thing. And look at the psychology of this surge. For years, the gold investors and the silver stackers were told that the exchange was the only price that mattered. Spot price was everything. If spot was down, your net worth was down. But today, we have to ask, which spot price? If you are holding physical silver in your hand, is it worth $75 or is it worth $82? I would argue it is worth the higher number. In fact, I would argue it is worth even more because that $82 price in Shanghai is likely just the offer. The asking price, the price to actually get your hands on quantity, is probably higher. The difference validates the theory that paper silver is artificial. If the exchange price was authentic, arbitrage would have closed the gap in seconds. The fact that the gap continues, that it is expanding day by day, proves that the exchange is damaged. It proves that the metal in New York is restricted. It is trapped. It is rehypothecated. It cannot move fast enough to satisfy the requirement in Shanghai. The infrastructure of the Western financial system is blocked with paper derivatives, while the Eastern system is running on pure physical flow. So, when you see the headlines about the facility in Tennessee, do not think of it as a separate news story. Think of it as the U.S. government's direct reply to the Shanghai surge. They are building a barrier to stop the flow of silver from moving into the ocean of the Chinese market. They are trying to create a protected area for critical minerals in North America, but barriers take time to build. This facility won't be fully working until 2029. What happens between now, January 2026, and 2029? What happens during the 3 years where the gap exists, but the barrier isn't completed? The drain speeds up. The alarm increases. The price on the exchange will have to rise to match Shanghai, or the exchange will be emptied completely. This is the impossible situation for JP Morgan and the Fed. They want to keep the price low to hide inflation. But if they keep the price low, they lose all the metal to China. If they want to keep the metal, they have to let the price rise. They have lost authority. The $82 reality is forcing their decision. And this brings us to the strategic necessity of the location. Why Tennessee? Why a facility that processes materials? Why is this specific plant the chosen solution to the Shanghai problem? Because the United States has understood that it cannot just rely on recycling or small domestic mines. It needs to access a huge source of new metal, a source that is currently moving towards China's influence. It needs to intercept the supply from Latin America. It needs to obtain the flows from the unstable, resource-rich nations to our south before they sign long-term contracts with Beijing and Yuan. This project is larger than just a factory. It is a geopolitical anchor. It is a move to obtain the supply lines of the Western Hemisphere. When we say this is larger than Venezuela, we are not using exaggeration. We are talking about the fundamental rewiring of the global energy and defense supply chain. For the last 30 years, the West has been playing a risky game. We allowed the middle stage, the processing and refining capacity to move almost entirely to Asia. We were content to dig the rocks out of the ground in Nevada or Peru, put them on a boat to China, let them refine it, and then purchase back the completed metal. It was less expensive, it was effective, and it worked. As long as the world was peaceful, but the world is no longer peaceful. The world is dividing, and in a divided world, if you do not control the processing plant, you do not control the metal. The Pentagon examined the map and understood a frightening truth. North America processes less than 10% of the world's critical minerals. China processes 80 to 90%. If a war begins tomorrow, or if a trade restriction like the one we saw on January 1st increases, it doesn't matter how much silver ore we have in the ground in Mexico. If we can't turn that rock into high-purity military-grade metal, we have nothing. We have dirt, and you cannot put dirt into a hypersonic missile guidance system. This $7.4 billion plant is the solution to that strategic problem. It is designed to be a critical minerals stronghold. It will process 1.1 million tons of raw material every single year. And while the headline says zinc facility, do not let that deceive you. Zinc is just the carrier. The real prize is what else is hidden inside that ore. This plant will manufacture 13 specific non-ferrous metals. 11 of them are on the U.S. Geological Survey's critical minerals list. We are talking about indium, which is necessary for touchscreens and solar panels. We are talking about gallium and germanium, the building blocks of semiconductors and night vision equipment. And of course, we are talking about silver. The strategy here is what military planners call blocking. Right now, the vast majority of the silver and zinc materials produced in Latin America in the rich mines of Peru, Chile, Mexico, and Bolivia are loaded onto cargo ships and transported across the Pacific Ocean to Chinese processing plants. China purchases the raw earth, processes it, keeps the strategic byproducts for itself, and sells the leftovers back to us. The Tennessee facility is designed to block that flow by building a world-class plant in the American South, closer to the origin. The U.S. is trying to create a pull that is stronger than China's. They want the miners in Lima and La Paz to send their ships north to New Orleans and up the Mississippi River to Tennessee instead of west to Shanghai. They are trying to cut the supply line that feeds the Chinese industrial machine. This is where the Venezuela link becomes critical. We know that Venezuela sits on huge underdeveloped mineral wealth, not just oil, but gold, iron, and potentially vast silver reserves that are essentially off the grid. If the rumors of a yuan for oil agreement are true, and the blockade suggests they are, then China's actively trying to secure Venezuela's resources. The U.S. cannot permit a Chinese resource territory to exist in its own backyard. This facility gives the U.S. a commercial weapon to fight back. It allows them to say to Latin American nations, "We will process your metal here. We will finance your mines. We will integrate you into the Fortress North America supply chain." It is an attempt to rebuild the Monroe Doctrine, not with warships, but with industrial furnaces. And look at the timing of the construction. Site preparation begins in 2026, construction in 2027, operations in 2029. This schedule tells us exactly when the Pentagon expects the resource conflict to reach its peak. They are racing against time. They know that for the next 3 years we are vulnerable, we are exposed. But they are wagering $7 billion that by the end of the decade, the world will be separated into two distinct economic blocks, the East and the West. And in that world, the only metal you control is the metal you can touch. This is why JP Morgan is participating. They are not just the financial provider, they are the logistics coordinator. They are the ones who will write the contracts with the mines in Peru. They are the ones who will protect against the price risk. They are positioning themselves to be the gatekeeper for the entire Western Hemisphere's metal supply. They are essentially privatizing the strategic reserve. And do you think they are doing this because they expect the price of silver to decrease? Do you invest $7 billion in a factory to manufacture a product that is becoming worthless? No. You make that investment because you believe the product is becoming invaluable. You do it because you believe that access to physical metal will be the defining competitive advantage of the 21st century. This facility is the final confirmation of the end of the globalist trade model. It is the end of just-in-time efficiency and the beginning of just-in-case security. It is the admission that the free market failed to protect national security, and now the heavy hand of the state is taking control. And for the silver investor, this is the most positive signal imaginable. When the most powerful military on earth and the most powerful bank on earth combine forces to accumulate your asset, you don't sell, you buy. You understand that you're holding a piece of national security. You're holding the very material that the superpowers are competing to control. But there's one final piece of this puzzle that we must address. We have talked about the geopolitical conflict, we have talked about the industrial conflict, but we haven't talked about what this does to the pricing system itself. Because if the Pentagon is purchasing physical and China is purchasing physical and the facilities are being built to accumulate physical, what happens to the paper contracts on the exchange? What happens to the billions of ounces of paper silver that trade every day in New York pretending to be authentic? If the real metal is being locked away in military storage and Chinese reserves, the paper market loses its underlying asset. It becomes a phantom, and phantoms eventually vanish. We've talked about the solar stranglehold, we have talked about the Shanghai surge, and we have talked about the Fortress America strategy in Tennessee. But what does all of this actually mean for the price of silver? It means that the pricing system we have used for the last 50 years, the futures market is finished. It is already dead. The $7.4 billion investment in the Clarksville facility is the death certificate of paper silver. Consider the reasoning here. If the exchange futures market actually functioned, if a paper contract was truly as valuable as physical metal, why would the Department of Defense need to spend $7 billion to construct a factory? If they could just purchase paper silver on a screen and take delivery whenever they wanted, they wouldn't need to partner with Korea Zinc. They wouldn't need to claim 40% of the production. They would just purchase when prices drop. The fact that they are investing in concrete and steel into the ground proves that they know the paper market is an illusion. They know that when the emergency hits, when the missiles need to launch or the grid needs to be rebuilt, you cannot melt down a futures contract. You cannot put a digital promise into a guidance system. You need the physical atom, element 47. And they know that the paper market is essentially creating more claims than there are atoms in existence. We have discussed the proportions before. For every ounce of physical silver in the exchange storage, there are hundreds of ounces of paper silver traded. This fractional reserve system works fine when everyone is peaceful. It works fine when nobody wants delivery. But what happens when the Pentagon wants delivery? What happens when China wants delivery? What happens when JP Morgan, the very builder of the paper game, decides to stop playing and starts accumulating the physical bars coming out of Tennessee? The game finishes. The musical chairs stop, and there are no chairs remaining. This agreement in Tennessee is the signal that the major players are leaving the gambling hall. They are taking their winnings from the paper control scheme and converting them into hard assets before the gambling hall burns down. They are leaving the everyday investor holding the bag of worthless paper contracts while they lock the doors to the physical storage. This is why the difference between Shanghai and New York is expanding. Shanghai is trading the actual price because they are trading physical. New York is trading the artificial price because they are trading paper phantoms. And as this facility starts operating, and as the supply from Latin America gets redirected directly to Tennessee, the exchange will become even less relevant. It will become a museum of price discovery while the actual market happens behind closed doors and exclusive purchase agreements. So when you ask, is paper silver artificial? The answer is no longer a theory. The $7 billion receipt from the Pentagon is the evidence. They are wagering on a world where physical possession is the only rule. Physical is supreme. And if you're holding paper, if you are holding an unallocated pool account or an investment fund that doesn't allow you to take delivery, you're essentially holding a donation receipt to the banks. You're funding their transition to physical while you get left with nothing. This is the great separation. The price of paper silver might go to zero or it might go to infinity, but it won't matter because you won't be able to exchange it for metal. The metal will be in Tennessee. It will be in Shanghai. It will be in the safe of the person who understood that possession is 9/10 of the law, and in the silver market, it is 10/10 of the law. So we have the geopolitical alarm, we have the bank transformation, we have the collapse of paper. What is remaining? What is the final instruction for the individual investor who is watching this giant's battle from the sidelines? You can't construct a facility, you can't purchase a mine in Peru, but you can do one thing that puts you on the same side of the transaction as the Pentagon. You can follow their example. So, the strategy is straightforward. You do not listen to the Federal Reserve Chairman when he stands at the podium and tells you that inflation is managed. You do not listen to the Treasury Secretary when she tells you that the supply chain is strong. You do not listen to the bank analysts who tell you that silver is a primitive relic that yields nothing. You ignore their words entirely. Instead, you watch their actions. And right now, the actions of the United States government are writing a $7.4 billion payment to obtain the very metal they tell you not to worry about. This is the ultimate reveal in the game of poker we are playing. If silver was truly plentiful, if the price was truly destined to stay at $75, the Pentagon would simply purchase it on the open market as they needed it. They would not be claiming 40% of a huge industrial project. They are acting like a person who knows a storm is approaching. They are filling the storage. They are securing the windows. And if the most powerful military on the planet is preparing for a shortage, you would be an absolute fool to be selling your inventory. You should be doing exactly what they are doing. You should be gathering. You should be obtaining your own personal supply chain. And this brings us to a critical link for the everyday investor. A detail that connects the huge geopolitical chess moves in Tennessee directly to the coin in your pocket. We need to discuss Korea Zinc. This is the company the Pentagon selected. They didn't select a generic mining corporation. They selected Korea Zinc because they are the gold standard, or rather the silver standard of refining technology. But here's what you might not know. Korea Zinc is also a primary supplier of silver blanks and metal products to some of the most respected private mints in the world, including the Scottsdale Mint. When you purchase a stacker bar or coin from a mint that sources from the same supply chain as the U.S. military, you are not just purchasing a collectible. You are purchasing military-grade collateral. You're purchasing the exact same molecules that the Department of Defense is now desperate to secure for their missile guidance systems. This confirms the quality and the strategic importance of the everyday product. It means that the stacker bar in your safe is not just a chunk of metal. It is a piece of the same strategic asset that JP Morgan and the Pentagon are competing over. They are competing for the industrial output. You are holding the investment output. But it all comes from the same scarce origin. And as this facility starts operating and as the supply becomes restricted, the extra cost on that specific high purity metal is going to explode. The mints that have established relationships with these strategic refiners like Scottsdale will be the only ones with product to sell. Everyone else will be waiting in line behind the Tomahawk missiles. So, this is the message for January 5th, 2026. The window is closing. The government has officially entered the market as a major buyer. When the government becomes a purchaser, price sensitivity vanishes. They will create whatever amount of paper currency is necessary to obtain the metal. This puts a permanent, unbreakable floor under the silver market. The Shanghai surge to $82 is just the warning signal. The $7 billion facility is the declaration of conflict. We are entering a period of history where return on capital doesn't matter as much as return of capital. The paper system is collapsing. The debt is impossible to pay, the derivatives are poisonous, The only safe harbor is the physical asset that has no counterparty risk, the asset that conducts electricity, the asset that eliminates bacteria, the asset that reflects light. Silver. Do not let the instability shake you out. When they crush the paper price next week, remember the Pentagon. Remember that while the price on your screen went down, the government just spent billions to make sure they have enough. If they aren't selling, why should you? Be correct. Be patient and remain steady. You are holding the winning position. The shortage is authentic, the alarm is authentic, and the squeeze is unavoidable. This is John A.G. from Currency Archive. The government has revealed its cards. Now it's time to play yours. Hold the line. Like, subscribe, and share.